How police uncovered a hidden empire beneath a sandwich shop. Rain came down hard over the small town of Greenfield, Texas. It wasn't the kind of rain that people feared until it started breaking through the old storm drains, flooding Main Street and seeping into the basement of Marty's Deli, a place locals swore had the best roast beef sandwich in the county. But that night, something ugly was bleeding up from beneath the floorboards. When Officer Caleb Morris arrived just after midnight, the power was already out. Water sloshed around his boots as he shined his flashlight through the broken glass door. Inside, the chairs were overturned, the smell of wet bread and diesel fuel mixing with something sharper, chemical, metallic. He followed the trail of the flood to the back freezer, where an old door hung crooked off its hinges. The beam of his flashlight caught something unexpected. Beneath the floor, where the water drained faster than it should, was a black hole. Not a drain. A tunnel. He called for backup. By 3 a.m., the deli was surrounded by squad cars and crime scene tape. Detective Laura Perez, the kind of woman who'd seen too many crime scenes to be shocked anymore, stood at the entrance to the tunnel in her raincoat. "Who the hell builds a tunnel under a sandwich shop?" she muttered. No one answered. The SWAT team went in first. The tunnel wasn't wide, but it ran deep, lined with concrete, reinforced with steel. The deeper they went, the stronger the smell of gasoline and bleach became. The walls were slick, but polished. Someone had taken their time constructing it. After 50 yards, they reached the first chamber. Metal tables. Beakers. Industrial-grade ventilation. It wasn't just a tunnel, it was a lab. Detective Perez walked slowly, her flashlight trembling in her hand. The walls were painted white, but streaked with something brownish red. "They were cooking something," she said quietly. The evidence techs confirmed it minutes later. Bags of pseudoephedrine, barrels of solvents. But there was more. Lined against one wall were stacks of sealed cardboard boxes, each one labeled only with numbers and barcodes. Perez cut one open. Inside was a stack of cash, hundreds, 50s, 20s, still bound in bank wraps. 10 boxes, each filled to the brim. It was a drug operation bigger than anything the county had ever seen. But that wasn't the strangest part. The next chamber held something else entirely. Blueprints. Hundreds of them, pinned to the wall, showing an entire network of tunnels spreading beneath Greenfield, under shops, homes, even the police station. Every line was precise, measured. Someone had designed an empire underground. And in the center of that map, circled in red ink, was one word: control. As dawn broke, the town began to wake up, sirens still echoing through the streets, local news vans setting up outside the deli. The owner, Marty Delgado, was nowhere to be found. He'd vanished hours before the storm. His neighbors said he was a quiet guy, always smiling, always donating food to the church. Nobody could picture him running something like this. But Detective Perez wasn't convinced. She stood outside the deli, her clothes drenched, staring down the flooded street. Something about the operation didn't make sense. It was too sophisticated, too professional for a local cook. That's when Officer Morris approached her, his radio crackling. "Detective," he said, "you might want to see this." They walked behind the building, where the flood had washed away a section of concrete near the alley. Buried just beneath the surface was another tunnel entrance. Smaller, older, with bricks blackened by years of moisture. Perez crouched down, shining her flashlight inside. At the far end of the tunnel, something glinted. A gold watch, still ticking. Next to it, a hand, half buried in the mud. Perez froze. "Get forensics down here," she ordered. "Now." When the body was pulled out an hour later, it wasn't Marty Delgado. The corpse belonged to a man in a security uniform, one that hadn't been used in Texas for at least a decade. Inside his breast pocket was an ID badge, laminated and faded. It read, "Harold Quinn, City Infrastructure Division." Morris frowned. What the hell was a city engineer doing under a deli? Perez turned the badge over. Scratched into the plastic, faint but visible, were 3 letters. Oh, no one knew what it meant. But by evening, Homeland Security was already on the phone. That night, as the rain stopped and the floodwater began to retreat, Greenfield looked normal again. The diner lights came back on. Locals came out with their umbrellas, whispering about what they'd seen. But beneath their feet, beneath the cracked asphalt and the diner floorboards, was a city no one had ever known existed. And in the darkness, far below where the flood had ended, something else was still humming. A generator, still running, and a motion sensor light flickered on, illuminating a metal door that hadn't been opened in years. Behind it, stacked neatly in rows, were more boxes, labeled not with numbers this time, but names. Names of Greenfield residents. By sunrise, Marty's Deli was no longer a deli. It was a federal crime scene. The air smelled of bleach and wet concrete. Floodwaters still dripped through cracks in the ceiling, forming small puddles that reflected the flashing red and blue lights above. The chatter of radios filled the air as FBI agents moved in and out, cataloging everything from chemical containers to those strange boxes marked with names. Detective Laura Perez stood near the entrance of the tunnel, arms crossed, eyes hollow from exhaustion. Her badge caught the morning light as she stared at the evidence board already forming in the corner. On it were pinned photos: the tunnel, the body, the blueprints, and now, a growing list of Greenfield residents whose names had appeared on those boxes. None of them had criminal records. None of them were missing. And yet, each name was connected to something, or someone, inside that tunnel network. Perez exhaled. "This isn't just a drug lab," she muttered. "This is something bigger." Agent Thomas Hale from the FBI's Organized Crime Division joined her, his black suit smeared with dirt. "We ran the name on the dead engineer, Harold Quinn," he said. "Turns out he filed a city permit 20 years ago for underground maintenance tunnels. Project code, ODL." Perez turned to him. "What does that stand for?" Hale hesitated. "Operation Deep Line. A failed infrastructure plan. Supposedly abandoned due to budget cuts. But what if it wasn't?" The two exchanged a look. The tunnels weren't random. They had been there long before Marty's Deli even existed. Someone had repurposed them. Perez rubbed her temple. So this wasn't just a drug front. Someone used the old tunnels to build a hidden network, right under everyone's feet. Minutes later, a field tech shouted from inside the tunnel. "Detective, you need to see this." Perez ducked under the caution tape and followed the narrow passageway into one of the deeper chambers. The tech pointed to a rusted metal cabinet half submerged in murky water. Inside, wrapped in plastic, were dozens of floppy disks and old security tapes labeled by date: 2003, 2005, 2006. She carefully peeled one open. The first disc had a single handwritten label: trial footage. They didn't have the right equipment on site, so the team rushed everything to the temporary FBI command tent outside. Hale inserted one of the tapes into a digital converter. The screen flickered to life, grainy footage, time-stamped June 14, 2003. It showed a concrete room, the same one they'd just come from. Two men stood over a table. One wore a lab coat, the other a police uniform. On the table, a stack of small glass vials. The man in uniform spoke first. "The formula works, but we can't push it to market yet. Too unstable." The scientist replied, "It's not for market. It's for control." Perez's heart pounded. She froze the frame and leaned closer. The officer's badge caught the light for a split second, enough to read his name. Captain Rayner, Greenfield Police. She turned to Hale. "That's impossible. Rayner retired 10 years ago. He's been living in Arizona." Hale's face darkened. "Then maybe it's time we paid him a visit." By afternoon, they had Rayner in custody. The retired captain looked frail, his hands trembling as he sipped coffee in the interrogation room. But his eyes, cold, distant, never broke contact with Perez. "You really think you found something new?" he said softly. "You're late, detective. 20 years too late." Perez leaned forward. "Then tell me what ODL is. What were you building under that deli?" Rayner smiled weakly. "It wasn't under the deli back then. It was under the city hospital. The deli came later, an access point." He paused, staring at the table. "We thought we were helping people, creating a solution for addiction, a way to regulate dependency. But it got out of control. The government cut funding, but certain people didn't stop. They saw profit in control. Perez frowned. Who are they? Rayner's lips trembled. You'll find out soon enough. They own this town. They always have. Moments later, Rayner's hand began to shake violently. His coffee cup shattered. He gasped for breath, collapsing onto the floor. Paramedics rushed in, but it was too late. He was gone, dead from what the coroner would later call a massive cardiac arrest. But Perez knew better. She'd seen the twitch, the foam at his lips. Poison. Someone had silenced him. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat alone in her car outside the deli, watching the yellow tape flutter in the wind. The city looked peaceful, too peaceful for the horror buried below. She opened her laptop and replayed the footage again. This time, she noticed something she'd missed before. On the back wall of the lab, behind the two men, hung a large seal, faded but recognizable. It wasn't a police insignia. It was corporate. The logo read, Virontex Pharmaceuticals. Perez's pulse spiked. Virontex had been a major player in pain medication in the early 2000s before vanishing amid scandal. Lawsuits, overdoses, corruption, all buried under legal settlements. And now their name was under her town. She picked up her phone and called Hale. I think this goes beyond drugs. The tunnels weren't just for production, they were for testing. Testing what? Hale asked. Perez hesitated, staring at the photo of the boxes with residents' names. People, she whispered. They were testing on people. A silence filled the line. Then Hale said, Get out of there. Now. But before she could respond, her headlights caught movement near the deli. A shadow darted across the flooded street, vanishing behind a dumpster. Perez stepped out of the car, hand on her holster. Who's there? No answer. She inched closer, the puddles rippling around her boots. A faint metallic sound echoed, like a hatch closing underground. She pointed her flashlight toward the alley. The brick wall looked normal, except for one thing. A thin line of condensation running down from a small, square vent, just wide enough for someone to crawl through. When she crouched to inspect it, she found a scrap of torn paper wedged inside. 3 words written in shaky handwriting. They're still alive. Perez's hand trembled. She turned toward the dark alley, but it was empty. Only the quiet hum of the underground remained. By the third night, Greenfield no longer slept. News vans lined Main Street, the deli glowed with floodlights, and reporters whispered theories ranging from drug syndicates to government experiments. But behind the police tape, only a few knew the real horror. Detective Laura Perez hadn't left the site since the message appeared. They're still alive. It played over and over in her head, the handwriting etched into her thoughts. She couldn't shake it. Someone had been down there after the flood. Someone who knew what ODL truly meant. FBI agent Hale was waiting beside a new excavation site, a deeper access point unearthed beneath a manhole near the deli. The air that rose from below was heavy, sour, filled with the stench of rust and chemicals. You sure about this? Hale asked. We've got no idea how deep this network goes. Perez adjusted her flashlight, her voice steady. If people are still alive down there, I'm not waiting for another briefing. They descended together, the sound of dripping water echoing around them. The deeper they went, the colder it became, a silence so thick it swallowed their voices. The passageway narrowed, then opened into a vast underground chamber lined with concrete walls and humming machinery. The floor was littered with old lab equipment, overturned chairs, and shattered glass. A single fluorescent light flickered weakly above a steel door marked, Control, Access Restricted. Perez glanced at Hale. That word again. They pushed through. Inside was a room unlike anything they'd seen. Rows of metal pods lined the walls, tall enough to fit a person, each sealed with reinforced glass. Some were empty, others fogged from the inside. Red indicator lights blinked faintly on a control panel nearby, powered by a generator that somehow still ran after all these years. Hale stepped forward and wiped one pod clean. Behind the glass was a man, pale, motionless, tubes running from his arms into a filtration system. His chest barely moved. Perez's stomach twisted. Oh my God, these are people. She scanned the tags attached to each pod, names matching those on the boxes upstairs. Citizens of Greenfield. Every last one. Suddenly, one of the pods hissed. A red light flashed. The man inside stirred, weakly, like he'd been asleep for years. His eyes opened just enough to see Perez. His lips moved, no sound at first, then a rasp. "Don't turn it off." The generator sputtered. The lights flickered again. Hale cursed and rushed toward the control panel, but before he could touch it, a figure appeared in the doorway, silhouetted, calm, holding a gun. It was Marty Delgado. Subscribe for more dark mysteries, true crime documentaries, and real-life suspense stories every week.